there might be immediate sexual energy in that in the following couple minutes, just because Natalie is an overly sexual person who fantasizes about being dominated by the people she hates. Like, at the end of my last video, she ends up having sex with, like, a doll of Jordan Peterson. And that was about the end of the video because I hit 14 minutes, but then I realized that if I would start the video, then people would go, "Oh, you're uploading porn, ha!" Because, it's not porn, it's just Natalie being autistic.
So you gotta give it to JP. When he says stand up straight with your shoulders back, he means it. So Jordan Peterson has succeeded largely by drawing in audiences with fairly popular opinions. Political correctness often feels stifling. Student activists are sometimes inarticulate and overreactive. Angry transsexuals are telling me what words to use, and I don't like it. But once he draws you in with these inviting preludes, he leads you to a pretty weird place. His central political message is that leftist professors, student activists, campus diversity initiatives, and corporate HR departments are collectively following the philosophy of postmodern neo-Marxism to destroy Western civilization and sink us all into a totalitarian nightmare.
Well, here's the thing about universities, and this is the reason why I wouldn't, like, I was considering going to university, but then universities, like, the whole point of university is for young people to spark political discussion, but the thing is that when you spark political discussion, you need, like, if you're going to have a debate, you need someone to sort of moderate it, someone centrist to moderate it, but all the professors are now left-wing, so if a left-wing person or right-wing person are debating in a university, then the moderator, the professor moderating the debate, is going to cut off the right-wing person all the time, just like, just be biased. Also, when they're teaching political stuff, it's supposed to be centrist, only the facts, no bias, or just say, left wing thinks this about this thing, the right wing thinks this about that thing. Anyway.
Now there's just no avoiding that this idea is actually pretty similar to the cultural Marxism or cultural Bolshevism theory, but I'm just going to ignore that because if I dwell on it, I'll sound like I'm saying Peterson is a fascist, and then everyone will think I'm crazy. Look, I'm not afraid of psychologists. I don't have nothing to hide, so let's just try not to think about that, and instead,
you are hiding a dick.
Straightforwardly ask, is it true that postmodern neo-Marxism is out to destroy us all? Well, why don't we analyze the concept of postmodern neo-Marxism? We all know what Marxism is, the idea that society should be understood as a class struggle between workers and capitalists, and that the workers will eventually revolt. Some college professors definitely do believe that, but 0% of corporate HR departments do, so okay. So what is postmodernism? Well, it's the vaguest word in the English language. Some people try to explain it by listing all of the things that are called postmodern and then trying to guess what they have in common. That's basically what the YouTuber Armored Skeptic did in his video about it. So many daddies in this video. We should invite them all to a barbecue, complain about postmodernism, listen to some Zeppelin. I've had worse evenings. I don't think there really is a common thread linking all the things called postmodern. Basically, postmodernism is everything that happened after 1945 that seemed new at the time. But when Jordan Peterson says postmodernism, he's not talking about Andy Warhol or Quentin Tarantino. He's talking about postmodern philosophy. So what's that? Well, basically, it's a kind of skepticism. Not YouTube skepticism, but actual skepticism. Like having doubts about whether humans can really know things about the world. Now, skepticism is obviously not a new idea. That goes way back to ancient times. But more specifically, postmodernism is skepticism about modernism. So what's modernism? What's what? What are words? What's anything? I'm going to divide modernism into two periods because I feel like it. First, there's early modernism. Early modernism is the philosophy developed by a bunch of boring 18th century queens, which says that we can form universal theories about the world through observation and reasoning, aka the scientific method. Now that turns out to work pretty well for whatever questions you have about plants and crystals and how to medically reconfigure human genitals, but it has some limits, which was pointed out by David Hume, one of the least boring 18th century queens, and one of the only philosophers I can actually put up with in small doses, even though he was a fucking racist and also Scottish. This
guy hated black people, but I hate this guy because he's Scottish. This guy hates people for things that they couldn't control. I hate this guy for something he can't control. My point being, Natalie, you're a hypocrite. Also, of course he's a racist. He's from pre-civil rights movement. It was even before all the slaves were freed in America. I know that you're talking about France, but you get the point.
Out. Hume argued that from a strictly empirical perspective, you can't really know much about important things like morality, causation, and the self, because those aren't the kinds of things you can observe. Anyway, then the late modernists came along and they said, fuck Hume, we're gonna do science about those things anyway. So the late modernists were a bunch of boring 19th century neckbeards who, one way or another, tried to discover universal scientific truths about humans.
So what you're saying is Karl Marx is boring?
For example, you have psychoanalysis, which said human nature can be understood in terms of unconscious drives, which is, of course, ridiculous. I'm conscious of all my drives. And you got Marxism with its analysis of bourgeoisie and proletariat. You got early sociology.
Don't think I picked up on that sexual energy of you eating that corn dog.
And anthropology, which
I feel like you're gonna get off on. I feel like you would get off on me calling you a dirty slut. So I'm not gonna do that.
Started out with racist social evolutionism and progressed to a kind of we're all the same universalism. Jordan Peterson is right at home with the late modernists. His first book, Maps of Meaning, is an attempt to describe how humans make sense of the world and create order out of chaos through universal myths and archetypes, which he claims are a product of our species' evolutionary past. Boy, this is a lot of explaining. It's so much explaining, it's triggering gender dysphoria. I better put on some longer nails. Nails? Is that all womanhood means to you?
Hey, my name is Lil Nas.
Again, really? Like, it was fine the first time, but you need a diversity of ads. Having the same ad over and over again of Lil Nas X saying, guys, I like pronouns, go buy UGG stuff from UGG, isn't going to convince me to buy stuff from UGG even if I had easy access to UGG shops because I have my VPN. My VPN isn't even on. There are no UGG shops in the UK as far as I know. Like, what the hell?
Postmodernism is skepticism about modernism. So whereas modernists try to create eternal and universal theories about reality, history, and humanity, postmodernists say, actually no, that's not possible. For example, the French postmodernist
Michel Foucault.
Sargon, you little goose,
Michel Foucault
wrote intellectual histories of subjects like psychiatry, medicine, and criminal justice, in which he argued that we should not understand these histories as straightforward regressions toward liberty and scientific truth, but rather as mere shifts in the way that power orders our institutions and populations. The other postmodernist I've actually read a lot of is Richard Rorty. Yeah, fuck you, Derrida. If you wanted me to read you, you should have been easier to read. Rorty advocates an attitude toward knowledge he calls ironism, irony being the skeptical caution with which we should regard our own beliefs and our awareness that our vocabulary for describing and understanding the world is not the final or best vocabulary. Alright, that's enough explaining. And my nails are done. Check it out. Do you enjoy?
I haven't paused the video in a while because I couldn't really understand anything she was saying.
Having long, glamorous nails, but the lesbians and queer girls keep glaring at them with barely concealed.
Whoa, Natalie, that's offensive. And you admit that you are straight, so you are making fun of someone of another kind. That is offensive. Okay, I thought I was going to sneeze. Anyway, that was offensive.
Visceral rage? Well, I have a solution for you. The bisexual manicure. One hand for the V, one hand for the D. Both for degeneracy. It's absolutely...
So you're bisexual then?
filthy. So we've got all the pieces on the table. Now we've just got to put the puzzle together. On the one hand, we have Marxism, a fundamental modernist worldview that theorizes the human condition in economic terms. On the other hand, we have postmodernism, a skeptical...
I haven't sneezed in a while. How come I've only started doing it when I'm recording?
worldview that denies our capacity to know any universal truths about anything. On the face of it, it would seem these two ideas are not compatible. And there is an extensive history of dispute between them, with, for instance, the Marxist Sartre calling Foucault the last barricade the bourgeoisie can erect against Marx. And of course, as we all know, when Foucault died, capitalism did end forever. So where does Peterson get off talking about postmodern neo-Marxism? Well, it's true that a lot of postmodernists were in some way influenced by Marxism, so the phrase could just refer to that continuity. But that's not what Peterson means. It's clear from the way he uses the term that the concept is even more jumbled and nonsensical than it initially appears. Peterson uses the term postmodern neo-Marxism to include not only postmodern intellectuals and Marxist intellectuals, but also
We get it, you're a fan of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So am I. In fact, Always Sunny in Philadelphia is my favorite comedy show. But Jordan Peterson isn't paranoid. The context of Pepe Sylvia is that a main character gets a job delivering posts for everyone, and he keeps on receiving posts for someone called Pepe Sylvia. So he tries to find Pepe Sylvia's office, but he just can't find it, so he goes insane looking for Pepe Sylvia. And I think she's trying to say that Peterson is insane. He isn't. So let's see. Never mind.
politicians, academic administrators, and corporate HR departments that care about diversity, and so-called identity politics activists, including feminists, LGBT, and civil rights activists. Basically, it's the entirety of the modern left. Now, I've already mentioned how Marxism and postmodernism are fundamentally at odds, since Marxism is a big story about a struggle between two clear and distinct groups, and postmodernism is skepticism about big stories like this, and about the stability of binaries like bourgeoisie and proletariat. But that's not the only tension in Peterson's clusterfuck idea of postmodern neo-Marxism. Anyone with any experience in leftist circles knows that Marxists and identity politics activists are constantly at each other's throats, because the Marxists accuse the activists of being bourgeois dogs who want more female CEOs of color and more disabled transgender drone pilots, while the activists accuse the Marxists of being a boys' club of brocialists and no more woke on gender and race issues than the average Jordan Peterson fan. Most often, these accusations are correct, because everyone is problematic and I disown them all. And then there's also the conflict between the identity politics activists and the postmodernists. Why does everyone think that identity politics is postmodern? There's nothing postmodern about it. Identity politics advocates for rights, equality, and justice for particular groups, such as women, people of color, and gay and trans people. This kind of...
Yeah, but the thing about people of color is that it's kind of... it can be seen as racist, because the one group that isn't of color is white people. So you're saying that white people are on a different sort of scale to other people, whether they be black or Asian or another race. Like, that can be seen as racist, and people on the left wing have pointed that out. Because the BBC started using, I think they stopped using it now, but they used to use a thing called BAME, Black Asian Minority Ethnic, which is the exact same thing, basically, whites and non-whites. Anyway.
Activism presupposes that these group categories exist and are a useful basis for political organizing. Postmodernists do kind of the opposite. They want to show that these categories, race, gender, sexual orientation, are contingent social constructs and are themselves potentially oppressive. This is why conventional...
Well, don't you all believe that gender is on a spectrum? Like, I don't think it's on a spectrum. I think that masculinity and femininity is on a spectrum. I'm a guy, but I'm quite feminine. I have a masculine side, which is obvious when I get angry, but overall I am a feminine person, but I am not. I'm not a woman. I am a man, and nothing can change that. Injecting hormones doesn't change anything other than my physical appearance. It does not change my gender. It does not change my sex. Oh, for Christ's sakes, it's over 15 minutes.